Thank you. Under Portland City Code and state law, the Portland Utility Board is holding this meeting electronically. Board members and relevant city staff are attending remotely, electronically, or by phone, and the city has made it available for the public to listen to the audio broadcast of this meeting. The public will have an opportunity to provide comments during the public comment portion of the agenda and can also provide written testimony to the board by emailing utilityboard@portlandoregon.gov. All right, PUB believes and acts upon anti-racist principles. In our meeting spaces and interactions with PUB, while every person has the right to share their personal perspective, we stand against wrongful conduct, particularly any conduct that is targeted toward people that are made vulnerable by systemic inequities. This means stepping up as a community when there is wrongful conduct and fostering a space of learning and growth. Be active and deliberate, speak up and speak out. Each person is empowered to maintain the culture of the Portland Utility Board, focus on the impacted individual or population, condemn the conduct, not the person.
Hi, my name is Amy Archer-Masters, and I'll quickly run through the meeting guidelines. Please state your name before you speak, if appropriate, the person you are addressing or that you're addressing the group. The chat box is only viewable by myself and Jonna Lynn, so please limit any chats to technical and logistical issues, including signing up for public comment, asking for technical assistance, or reminding us if you've had your hand raised and have not been called on to speak. The raise hand function is primarily used by the board during discussions. We may lower your hands once you begin speaking just to maintain the flow of conversation. During public comment periods, public can raise your hand and you'll be called on when appropriate. If you're connecting by phone, you may need to press *9 to raise your hand. Videos may be turned on when speaking if desired. It is not required. We do ask that you mute your microphone when you're not speaking, and if you're connecting by phone, that may mean you need to press *6 to mute and unmute yourself. Public comment is taken during the comment period early in the meeting. You can sign up through chat with myself or Jonna Lynn, or raise your hand during the comment period. It's also available just prior to any formal board vote after a motion has been made and seconded by board members, and the meeting is being recorded.
Beautiful. So looking at today's agenda, we just wrapped up the call to order, moving through public comment and review of minutes for 5. And then we have a series of updates being provided by PUB staff, including filtration, solid waste rate review status, service area and utility updates, and field trip planning. Then a presentation of the Smart Discount Pilot Phase 2 update for 35 minutes, including discussion afterwards. We have a PUB budget and engagement planning, which is an internal discussion to prepare ourselves for the quarter and the months ahead. And then finally, announcements and next PUB meeting, and then adjournment. Great. Next up, disclosure of communications. This is a moment set aside for any voting board member to disclose any communications with city leadership or bureau staff regarding items that could relate to PUB's work. Are there any items that PUB members wish to disclose? Great, we move forward together. Moving on to public comments. Amy, has there been anyone who submitted formal comment before the meeting began?
We've not received anything in advance, and so far I do not have any chats.
All right, then we transition directly into the review of minutes. So there were 2 sets of minutes distributed, both October 7th and October 18th. Are there any adjustments or changes requested by board members to the minutes as they were distributed? I have none myself.
Sorry, I believe that should say the 16th, though.
Oh, cool,
I think you were correct in the date.
Sweet. Seeing no changes submitted, the minutes are accepted. Great. I hand it over to Amy and Jonna Lynn for updates.
Great, thank you. So we'll move through pretty quickly on some of these because there's not a ton of new information, but just wanted to make sure that we touch base on some of the items that were raised previously. So just to close out the annual report on the Bull Run filtration projects went before council on October 29th and was accepted, approved by council. We did include the pub's feedback. So a written letter was submitted as testimony and it is available on the pub website. You should have received that in advance. Let us know if you have any questions or follow up, and we'll just keep you posted when the next update is ready later next year. Solid waste rate review. We mentioned just briefly that there had been a request for pub to consider whether you could serve as the advisory board to provide feedback on solid waste hauling rates. Pub staff did have a brief meeting with internal stakeholders, so we have some next steps. I don't have more information for you today other than just that the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability staff who oversee those programs are drafting up some information to kind of document some of what we discussed as far as time commitment and what they are considering as far as the needs both in the current year and future years for rate review. So once we have that, we will get that out to pub members. So I'm hoping we'll have more information and can have it as a brief discussion topic on the November 20th. So nothing needed before then. We will follow up. Field trip planning, just that you should have received a survey regarding your availability. If you have not completed it, please do so after the meeting so that we can finalize the date and planning for that. We're potentially looking at either November 21st or December 5th as the dates that were the immediate availability. So we're hoping one of those will work. If not, we'll look for some other dates as well. Again, not mandatory, but for anybody who's interested, we just want to know if you're available and wanted to attend so that we can choose the one that works for the largest group. The Public Works Core service area updates and utilities updates. There was an internal town hall type event that was held by the Deputy City Administrator and the Bureau leadership to provide some updates to staff. So we have some just very high level information that was shared with us regarding what was covered at those meetings. So we'll quickly run through some of the key components. Some of these things we've discussed previously, so just wanted to give you what the latest update is. The city administrator, the role that Mike Jordan has been filling, is the recruitment is currently in process and still slated to have interviews done and the position hired by January of 2026. Communications was a major area of the initial focus of realignment. And so some of that concluded in September and is now in the process of being implemented. If you recall, there were some budget efficiencies that were to be achieved both in the current year and future years for core services realignment. And one of those made some assumptions around communications realignment. One of the components is a Public Works Service Area Senior Communications and Engagement Manager will be hired, and they'll be overseeing the 3 communication teams for the Public Works Service Area communications. So there's BES and Water, there's PBOT, and there's Parks. And then that role would oversee that. So I expect that we will learn more about that as that position is filled. They're just starting the recruitment for that. For the operations lead, Farshad Aladadi, who is the business services manager at Environmental Services, and that you all have engaged with quite a bit over time as one of the main point of contacts for the board. He will be serving as the interim Public Works Service Area Business Operations lead for the rest of the core services realignment. So the initial focus was on human resources, procurement and technology services. And then the next phase is budget and finance, equity and community engagement. So those are some of the core areas that are being evaluated for potential overlapping functions and integration of services. The public works public works service area business services components, which is all of that, those internal pieces, will have leads from all of the representative bureaus that are part of Public Works. So that includes Cecilia and Farshad and some of their counterparts in the other Public Works bureaus to kind of do the evaluation of those overlapping functions and working on a plan. Another component of the overall core citywide services was the citywide Vision Zero policy manager. Dana Dickman is kind of the lead of within the Public Works service area for the Vision Zero policy. Council is recommitted to that goal of eliminating traffic deaths and serious injuries through a safe systems approach. And so that is one of the key priorities that as a service area that the DCAA was sharing information on. More specific to the utilities, a few of the other key pieces were also related to One Water initiative that you all have some early information on, and more is under development. As you know, the utilities director, the recruitment for that remains open until filled. The goal is to have it filled by January of 2026. So that will provide the unified leadership and integrated customer service and revenue programs of Water Bureau and Environmental Services. The second phase is identifying areas of alignment with the goal of joint organizational structure by April of 2026, or the structure being defined, full implementation by June of 2027. So that's an update regarding the overall timeline. There was some brief information about the Unified Capital Improvement Program as well. Obviously a multi-year effort, but they're launching in January of this next year, developing action plan and implementation of their highest priority steps, including the goal of a 5-year unified capital improvement plan. So again, this will be a citywide as well as within the public works service area. So there's multiple components to it. And as we learn more about that effort launching, and we can talk more about how we get updates and also provide feedback through the appropriate folks. And then finally, the establishment of the new natural resources organizational unit and the manager for the Public Works Natural Resources is Annie Von Berg. And that's to integrate all of those natural resource services that BES and others provide. It also is a multi-year process, but just getting started this month. So Annie, as the point and lead of those services, is working on the coordination of internal team and folks to get feedback and develop a plan for how that will be implemented. So another area that we have heard from you as a board, great interest in engaging. We will try to find out what those next steps are as she's on board and we learn more about those. Yeah, Kyle, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for the updates, Amy. A quick question on the Natural Resources Organizational Unit. That is that a direct extension of the only reference point I have is the Natural Resource Service Delivery Assessment from January 24, which was initiated in March 23. That's a direct extension of that work and that effort?
Yes. So the pub has engaged in some of the early discussions, and so when the city was doing its complete organizational structure reorganization and figuring out, where where the service areas would fall, there was discussion about natural resources service delivery and whether that because there's a lot of components that fall under Bureau of Environmental Services. There's also components that Parks oversees, and other bureaus across the city have other smaller, but probably the two larger components are within BES and Parks. And so there was discussion about whether it would be its own bureau, like elevated and its own system, which is something that Pub was potentially supportive of or wanted to see explored, or whether it would sit, under one of the bureaus, or ultimately it is landing under the Public Works Service area, and trying to just find efficiencies and effectiveness improvements of coordinating those services more cohesively across the city. So I imagine we'll learn more about what some of those outcomes are that they're looking to achieve, as well as some action plan for how they're doing an assessment. We do have some early materials of some of the beginning of the assessment activities, because we had utility board members who were participating in the work group with the city staff and other advisory board folks that are related to some of those service areas. So we have some early information, but I'm not sure how that's going to feed into kind of what comes next. So we'll certainly connect with both bureau leadership and the deputy city administrator, as well as Annie von Berg, to learn more. And Annie is somebody who has engaged with the pub in prior roles, so has some familiarity with the work that the utility board does, and coming from environmental services, obviously has some history of experience prior to her higher level administrative work that she's been doing at the city.
Thank you, Amy. Yeah, and I was just kind of glancing through that old that PDF from beginning of last year, and it's exactly what you described, which is like the problem of unclear ownership of natural resources work, how to actually align and coordinate the efforts across all these municipal bodies.
And I know that so Bob Salinger was one of the strong voices and folks who was pretty engaged in that early work, and really a strong advocate for taking the opportunity of both realigning the work, but really elevating it as well, and making sure that it remains a high priority for the city to be a leader in that space, and not lose sight of kind of the significant work that's been done, both historically and currently. So
beautiful. Any other questions from board members for any of the updates that Amy presented? All right. In that case, we continue moving forward. We are 5 minutes early, but we'll roll and leverage the 5 for the smart discount update. Is Director Light available, or who from the Water Bureau will be presenting today?
So we do not have a formal presentation, but I did just want to touch on a few highlights, and then we do have some staff in the room. I'll need to look and see who is here. I know that Director Light and others are here. And the goal is, first of all, to make sure that you all have received, and if you have not had an opportunity to read yet, please review more thoroughly the update regarding the Smart Discount pilot that was provided by the Bureau's staff to City Council and the Advisory Board, just with kind of a current status of where they're at, and plans for the next steps. So what I've highlighted here is just staff's, in our reading through, just a reminder of kind of the purpose of the programs, that it's the pilot using data-informed utility discounts. The memo has some more specifics around, how it was started, how it was funded, and the timelines. They did the phase one work, started in December of last year, went through July of this year, and then they've been working on the evaluation of results. So the document does summarize some of their early findings, that I think, as anticipated, are hoping and seem to be showing that simplifying the payment options and expanding the eligibility can have a positive impact on reducing delinquency and also providing an opportunity to reconnect with customers who have not made payments and getting them back engaged in payments that they can afford. So that first phase has been completed. They're still doing more thorough review of the results and beginning and working on the planning for the phase two. There are some more descriptive details regarding safeguards and accountability, specifically in some of the issues that we've heard from public comment regarding the algorithm and the safeguards for information. They are conducting an independent algorithm audit and certification process. So before they would move on to further implementation, they need to see more thorough results of the data that they have. And so those are kind of the next steps, is sharing more complete results from the first phase, and then collaboration with Pub and others on both the outcomes and the next steps and planning. So at a high level, that's the summary that we pulled from that. We do anticipate hearing more once the audit is complete and there's more thorough information from their review of the AI and the other components of it. What would be helpful is just as we continue to move forward, whether you have areas of questions today or in the future, please feel free to raise them now. Also reach out to us in between meetings or in the future, and we can always engage with staff in between and getting additional information for you all. So just wanted to take this time because there have been some discussions and requests for some agenda time on this topic to either ask the Bureau some direct questions or prepare them for a future conversation. Jenny, go ahead.
Yeah, hi, Jenny O'Connor, voting member. I'm curious about looking at the notes. Okay, services undergoing an independent algorithm audit and certification demonstrating compliance with National Institute of Standards and Technologies. So who is conducting that audit?
Keisha Light, interim director of the Portland Water Bureau. So that audit will be conducted through a third party. And I don't know, Becky, do we have the specific name of, I forgot to look at, but I don't know that we know the specific group yet, do we?
Let me see if I can find that information quickly, Quisha, and I'll come back online with it.
Yeah, thanks. I was just wondering if it was being done by some internal
No.
audit. Okay, it's okay.
We have Alexis, go ahead.
Yeah, hi, Alexis Rife, voting member. Thanks for the memo. It is helpful to see, and I'm eager to understand a little bit better all of this. And a couple of things that stood out to me as I do see reference to standards for ethical AI practices and transparency. And I was wondering if we could hear a little bit more on what those specifically are. I have just a lot of questions around trade-offs for AI, especially considering the energy use and the water use of AI, and just kind of considering that within our community. And I'm curious what even the city's policies are on AI. I know, right, it's growing rapidly use in our society, but these are the sorts of trade-offs that I'm always kind of thinking about using for a program like this that could potentially have really good outcomes for the bureaus and for the city and for people and our citizens. But I'm also kind of thinking about, are there strategies like tiered pricing? I know that our smart discount program, that our discount programs just tend to be a little bit more proactive, where people have to like apply for them, et cetera. And I guess I wonder a little bit more about some that don't rely quite so much on AI for the environmental impacts. And then as well, and then some of these kind of concerns around information sharing and data being shared more broadly. So those are, sorry, that was kind of like a word vomit of thoughts there, but I'm really curious about kind of like, what are our guiding principles when we're thinking about using AI and the trade-offs between those and then some other more manual programs that can, get similar outcomes.
So I do want to start from the place that right now we do all of this manually. So that it is, we have a lot of applications that are coming in right now, given everything that's happening. And I have essentially 3 staff that have to process all of that. We've streamlined it some over the years, and whether it's coming up with, if a person is on SNAP, we don't have to go through an extensive review of their application. So we've found ways to make some of that faster, but what it doesn't do is remove the barriers. And those barriers can be around language, that can be around government mistrust, just different things. And so it doesn't get at those things. And I completely understand. I love, and I will acknowledge to you all, and my team knows that I love ChatGPT. And every time I use it, I cringe because I know how much water one little search uses. And so, when we look at the principles, and I know we had some thoughts around. I have to go back and pull up the initial thoughts that we had, the principles that we had. I need to go back and pull it up. But was it things like the impact on water and the environment? I'm going to be honest with you that wasn't it, because right now, we are just trying to see where our goal is. Can we find other ways of being able to assist our customers? Could we proactively get them the aid that they needed? And so that wasn't, so the environmental aspects were not, they didn't outweigh that for us. We needed to see if there were other ways, because coming out of COVID, there were so many people, we knew we weren't reaching them. We have enhanced our communication efforts around financial assistance, and we've made it easier for people to apply. We are working more closely with our partners. We have 8 different, or is it 10? Maybe I think it's like 10 different partners that we work with. So there's a lot that we have done to try to deal with this. We have a tiered approach. We're looking at a rate study that'll allow us to look at whether we need to look at block rates. We'll do all of those things, but this was just an opportunity for us to test whether this is something that could be a benefit for us. And it may not be at the end of the day. And we'll have to, if we do the algorithmic assessment and we see that the algorithm is not only it's not biased, it's performing the way that we need to perform, then we'll have to have that question around trade-offs. And we'll have to be thinking about that a little bit more. Is this the way that we want to go? We're having the conversations as a staff around, we're getting enough information. We have enough data that's telling us things around how we could create more tiers. Even if the algorithm doesn't work, we can create more tiers in our financial assistance program based upon the data that we have already from this pilot. So I think the pilot, whether we go to we use machine learning going forward or not, to me, isn't the question. I really want to get at how can I offer more assistance across more people, whether I get more money or not. So if I can take the same pot of money that we have right now and spread it across more people, is that possible? And what do those tiers need to look like? What percentage of MFI are we looking at each of those tiers? I have 2 now. What would 4 tiers look like? So Becky, I don't know if there's anything else that you want to add to this, but those are some of the things that we've thought about, Alexis. I think I may have hit on most of what you raised.
You did. You did. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
No, I've actually just jotted down a couple more questions. Brooke, do you want to take the floor next, and I'll follow up after you?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Brooke Berhanu, voting member. Yeah, I think my question or questions are probably more related to the history around the pilot and also the existing discount program and how that operates. I'm wondering, you mentioned that there are 3 staff allocated to reviewing more applications than 3 staff currently have the bandwidth to do, and so I was curious if there was any discussion or investigation into processes that were more focused on automating the manual portions of the review, or is the process such that it's really just to take some kind of making some kind of judgment call on eligibility that can be replicated by an AI process, or ideally, or is it something that's more like following a checklist of review steps and like a decision tree that can allow for like yes, no, etc.
Yeah, I'd say it's more like maybe more like a decision tree aspect than automated, because we're getting income information from people, we're getting information about programs that they may be participating in and receiving other assistance. We're getting information about all the people living in their home, so they can complete the application online. So, we have made it be an online application, but we still get written applications. We have to process manual ones. I don't know that there are many aspects of this that we can automate short of someone clicking the box saying, I received SNAP, and they're automatically approved, but we're doing that as it is. So we're allowing things of that nature already. And so I don't know that the process itself, automating the process anymore, is going to help the barrier issue that we experience.
Sure. That's helpful. That was a helpful clarification. I had one quick follow-up. I think now more on the current pilot. I guess I'm wondering, as these randomized controlled trials are happening, what level? I know the algorithms themselves provided by or used by Service are proprietary, and their machine learning algorithms are kind of hard to look under the hood into anyways, but I'm curious, what level of insight or reporting does the water utility have into kind of some of the decision-making process of the eligibility determination? algorithm that's being used. Is there like explanation being provided as far as like what variables are being considered, what variables are more important than others, what information ends up not being useful that's being collected and maybe doesn't have to be, those kind of things?
I'm going to let Becky jump in on this, but I do want to quickly say this is something that we spent, before we even ran the randomized control trial, we spent 2 years with Service, really understanding our customer base, our information. They spent 2 years digging into a lot of these things so that they could construct an algorithm based upon our system as much as possible. And we were all very involved in every aspect of what's being considered, who's not considered, trying to ensure that we were not having a negative impact on customers. So, but I'll let Becky jump in on some of these aspects of where we were involved and how we are reviewing things now.
Yeah. Yes, and so also just wanted to be clear from the get-go, the algorithm isn't in use currently, it's still being developed. And so just wanted to start from that baseline, but there has been a lot of conversation back and forth about what can we use, what are reliable indicators, and a lot of that is focused around payment history and also seeing patterns in that history of if customers start to trend to where they perhaps were paying 100% of their bill, now they're trending into a percentage basis of that or breaking payments up. Some of those indicators that we're not able to see as well from our level within the system or from a reporting basis, but that the algorithm is able to see and able to identify. And so we start to identify those patterns and are able to utilize it in that manner. And really also looking at, as Quisha had mentioned, the optimal discounts and where that impacts behavior as well. And some of the findings in regards to, when a larger discount may not incentivize full payment or timely payment, were some of the more surprising aspects of that, and that we needed to take into consideration. So it has been a continual process over the year as we've looked at data in different aspects of it, but really working with our partners here in order to make sure that there's a thorough knowledge of what that data is and what that data means as they're going through, and then identifying those patterns. And then I did have the independent third-party auditor names too that I can loop back to if that hadn't answered your question, Brooke. Okay.
Yeah, that was great.
Okay.
I hopefully we'll be able to kind of reconvene after the pilots and get a better sense of some of these insights. It does sound like pretty interesting. So thanks.
Welcome.
Awesome. I'll take the floor next. I just have a handful of questions. I'll read them through and then maybe just speak them one at a time. The first question is specific to Service and the contract. The initial 350,000 not to exceed that was then quoted at the 210. Is that an initial upfront just to get the pilot program running? Would there be an ongoing contract with Service or some other outside agent or party to like keep the cost of this program, or it's just upfront investment? Once it's running, then it's fully in-house and it's actually minimal cost to the city?
So this will be, we would have to negotiate with Service. So that's part of, well, let me just say, part of what we were evaluating also and asking and spending some time thinking about and asking Service to think about is what is the right model, payment model or business model for something like this, because it's not out there. And we could use some type of, you do have software subscriptions, don't get me wrong, but it's evaluating for us what is the right structure for a program like this. So we will have to either go back out to the market and say, this is what we're looking for, or Service is going to have to put something else on the table. We will not continue. This will not be an ongoing, this isn't a purchase of the software, so to speak. We would have to go back out. So all of that is being evaluated as part of the pilot.
Beautiful. That's so helpful. Thank you. And also just for how quickly the field, I'm sure, is changing and how many more players are coming in. Just the ability to bid and keep assessing at each stage what transpired, what the investment played out, and I think Brooks, part of his questions was where I was formulating what would be the human trade-off to even approximate what we're getting in terms of just filtering and routing the information, and it seems substantial. What a human investment to hire staff to do the same level of work. My next question is, and I was looking back at the April 17th presentation on the initial Smart Pilot program. It was quoting July through the first week of November for RCT2. And I think just looking at the memo, it's RCT1 is just draft and you're starting to actually assess what has played out. I really dug in that first presentation in April, like there was some really great anecdotal evidence, like this is a person who was not paying for so long. We were able to flip them and activate them and switch a behavior. Are you, in assessing and analyzing the results of this first leg of the trial pilot program, are you starting to see larger behavioral trends beyond just an anecdote here and there, like we are activating this many people, or you're still doing that work right now?
You're doing that, but Becky, go ahead.
I no need to rush into
Yeah.
it if you're like still figuring it out, but that's moving from anecdotal to something that's systemic or statistical is an exciting reveal.
Yeah, still in that work. And so we are still in that anecdotal state of where we had re-engaged with customers that hadn't made payment in quite some time, but having those promising results, but we don't have the full scope for you yet.
Beautiful. All good. Thank you. Third question is specific to working with TransUnion, and it was helpful to see that you specifically highlighted it was only customer name and address. There was no financial information. Is the balance of not releasing or revealing any sensitive customer information, is that proving more and more challenging to even enter into this program? Like there's some level of Faustian deal where you have to let stuff out in order to get some benefit, or you can be clean, you can be guarded, you can keep stuff safe and be thoughtful and intentional.
I'll quickly say, I think this is going to be one of the challenges that we have, right? Because one, we don't want to house a bunch of income data from a cybersecurity standpoint, and to really be able to get at some of this, you need income data. And so this is where, as Becky mentioned, we're starting to look at what can you see in payment behaviors. Are they paying a certain percentage? Are they paying later? So we're really trying to stick in that space, because we don't want to house or share or send out in any way as any sensitive data. We were really trying to avoid that.
That leads to my final question, which is about public perception and people opting out to whatever upfront investment, either capital to get the program running or time to train people. If there's a public perception that I don't want to give my information out and then I don't even benefit, and you start to like kneecap yourself because people are unwilling, did you find that even in the pilot program? That was that dynamic, or it wasn't that bad? There was a handful, but by and large, people were willing and they saw the benefit from the program.
We didn't see a whole lot of opt-out during the randomized portion. And I understand, I do think you're right, that in the world, in the space we're in right now, that we could see that reality play out a little bit more, especially because during the trial, as Becky mentioned, the algorithm wasn't running. That was just randomized, right? So there wasn't an algorithm. But once an algorithm is running, I could see more people being nervous about, one, what data are you sharing, and is it sensitive data? And then we could say, okay, you can share information, share some sensitive data, but we don't want it any more than the customers want to give it. Those are some of the challenges that we're working through right now. What data do we really need for this algorithm to work the way that we want it to? And we are really balancing with that. We're really thinking through that right now.
Thank you so much for fielding, Becky and Director Light. Daryl, you have the floor.
Hi, Darryl Bob, voting member. Thank you, Kyle. I guess my question is sort of related to something Kyle mentioned. And you kind of gave the answer there too as well. But I'm wondering from like previous conversations and meetings that we had before, you mentioned bringing back kind of like strategic water shutoffs. I was wondering how like the preliminary findings in this discount pilot is maybe helping to uh, reduce that need or maybe reshape the criteria that you had in mind for um, how those shutoffs may be applied.
So I want to make sure I'm understanding how the pilot informs how we may look at shutoffs differently. Is that?
Yeah, basically, if like I believe when we were looking at the criteria of those that are taking up like maybe the lion's share of your delinquent accounts, I believe it was the landlords, if I remember correctly. Um, but given the early success of these findings, I wonder if they're having any sort of effect on how you evaluate. You may uh, like implement those shutoffs or change in criteria.
I don't know if in this moment we are at a place where we can say how that's going to influence our shutoff criteria. I mean, because the goal is to not have to go there, not have to shut off anyone. And if we can set up the right payment structure, the right payment discount, the right voucher, whatever it is, if we can set up the right thing, then we can avoid a customer having to face shut off. And we will definitely be using the data here. And that's where I think what, as Becky was sharing, being able to, if what we get from this to me is a model that's able to help us better understand when a customer is paying maybe half of their bill on the 15th of the month and another half on the 25th of the month. And but sometimes they're getting caught because of the way that the shut off or the bill notices come out or whatever. They're getting caught in between. If we had better insight into that, then we could shape programs around that to avoid someone facing shut off, or we could shape our better payment plan system around those types of things. So I think the data will definitely help us figure out what's the right program, what's the right structure that is going to help us keep people in accessing the water and sewer stormwater services that they need. So I don't know that in this moment that we have identified all of that, but I think those pieces are helping us get to a place where we can say, yes, we can restructure our programs in some unique ways to ultimately keep customers in accessing the services.
No, that's great. Thank you. I'm just happy to hear that there's a proposal for a linkage between the strategies. So
Yeah.
thank you again.
No, thank you. That's a good question. And they are definitely linked in that way. Yeah.
Useful. Thank you, Daryl. Myra, you have the floor. Dr. Myra.
Thank you. And thank you for presenting on this interesting pilot. I have two questions. So in terms of data collection and storage, is there a limited amount of time that someone's data is collected and used for this model? Or is this something where it's permanent? in the context of the algorithm will build on previous information.
You want me to take that one, Teresa? So Becky Anaker, our customer service manager, I should have started there. So the contractual obligations on our data sharing, it does continue to build on data. We continue to send the payment history and data. However, our standard contract language also has limitations on not only the purpose for that data, but also the extent. If say the contract we were to expire the contract or not continue, what the duration of the hold on that data could be.
Nice. And so just to confirm, the data will solely only be used for the discount program, or would it be used for other similar programs in other cities or for other purposes?
The contract stipulates that it is in for the purpose of this. So the intent would be for our program in this. And Quisha, do you have something to add to that?
The only thing where we may be, one of the things, I can't remember, I'll have to go back and look at the contract, but there may be in the aggregate, the opportunity to talk about things at like conferences and things of that nature, but not to be sharing the data.
Okay. And then my second question is, have you seen any bias? Sometimes with algorithms, there's unexpected outcomes in terms of biases. Have you noticed any in these randomized control trials? For example, in some AI algorithms, there can be biases against people that English is their second language, or age biases. Have you noticed anything with this program?
No, because this did not use the algorithm to randomly select. It just used the randomized like formula for Excel. It's just randomly selected accounts in that way.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
Beautiful. And Jenny, do you want to take the floor next? And then we're at 7 minutes for the end of this section.
Okay, there's something I don't quite understand. Okay, so far you're not actually using the algorithm, is that correct?
No, because the way that machine learning works at a high level is they're taking data in, assessing that data, learning it, trying to understand it, to then figure out like which of the variables should be used in different ways to help better predict or help you better understand the data. And so you start to train the algorithm. For us especially, it's more supervised and guided, so that we don't have some of the things that Myra was bringing up. We're trying to control for that by better programming the machine learning process to deliver more controlled results, I guess, so that we can avoid bias. So it's not, we're building it based upon the data that we've been able to collect. It's being built.
And so the folks that work for you are collecting the data, then sending it to the service, who then, anyway, you don't have to explain the whole thing. I'm just trying to understand.
So I will say this for you, Jenny. It is our customer information system so all the information that we have on our customers, like their, address, their bill history, that's where we're pulling this data from primarily and sending and sharing that with them. And then they're using things like census data and other things to kind of try to marry that up to see if we can tell things about customers that might help us understand whether they need a discount or not.
Okay, and so with regards to the audit's going to be done after the algorithm is finished?
Once it's built, yes.
Okay, so you don't have, and so somebody in the future will do an audit on this, but not right now.
Yes.
Okay, and who was that, Becky, that was going to do the audit?
we have two independent third-party audits that are For Humanity and Assessed Intelligence are the firm's names.
Thanks for that. And, you know, my hat's off to you for taking this on. Thanks, Kyle.
Thank you. I have kind of an open floor question for you both. I do want to also share just personally that in preparing for today's call, both reviewing Kate K's article and then reviewing the memo, it feels like specifically the nature of what seemed to be the absence of a bidding process makes a little bit more sense in the context of just trying to get this thing spun up, run through the trials, and then really assess if you choose to proceed. This is a full market, like we're going to go to bid because we want to proceed, or this is not a good fit for our bureau or our customers, and we don't want to even go this route. That makes sense to me. And also the limitation of the sharing data to a much larger third party like TransUnion, that it was quite limited fields, also feels better and that you are being quite sensitive. You don't want to host the sensitive data. And like, I'm the same way when I host stuff, I don't want to host it. I don't want to touch it. I don't want the liability of it. So both those points make sense for me personally. I'm wondering if you can talk us through, as you move into the randomized control trial 2, RCT2, what are your next steps? What are you looking for? What and how are you preparing? Just because it's a little scant in the actual memo for details or specifics.
You want to take part of that?
Yeah, I can. First and foremost, I think we need to have a strong understanding internally of the indicators in the algorithm, be able to understand it, be able to review that data of what's being proposed in the accounts, and have some internal analysis from our team members that are most familiar with this data as well in the program, to get also a sense of, are we comfortable, right? Before we put that out there for our customers or utilize it in any way, there's an internal, we continue to refer to it as our litmus test, that we will be doing. And so we have that aspect of it. In addition, there's just aspects quite honestly, in regards to resourcing for us as well, in order to stand this program up, and in the competitive priorities that we have, the competing priorities that we have, that really cause me quite a bit of concern, because it is a program that, right, we need to be able to be very thoughtful and considerate, and have a lot of different spaces that we're looking at and scenarios of how we stand this up, and to be able to answer questions, and a lot of training for our staff as well, and particularly for our contact center and our financial assistance program team, in order to make sure that we can explain it, that we have the options available and the opt-out, as well as any appeals process. So there are a lot of components of this for us that we still need to dial in. But first and foremost, it's starting with, do we feel that this algorithm is working as anticipated and as expected? How have those independent audits come back? And then, can we scale this, and is it affordable for us, particularly right in the current climate? So I think all of those aspects are weighing heavily as we look to move into phase 2 of this, and understand what that would mean and what that planning looks like, because there are certainly other programs and priorities that I don't see as acceptable trade-offs. I still strongly believe in some of the initial objectives of this, and in this role, especially in the interim, I'm even more exposed to some of those escalations that we find where people do not participate in our financial assistance program for a variety of reasons that I believe that this program would solve for, or help to solve for. But so I continue to go back to that. And I also would much prefer that we have team members working on outreach and communications and shaping in our financial assistance program versus reviewing applications. But it all has to come to, it has to be robust and mature to a certain extent for us to be able to do that. And that's my concern, is that we are now at the space where, before we roll this out, we really need to be in that fully comprehensive program space, and that takes time and resources to achieve.
think one other thing that I just would add is we are implementing a lot of technology over the next year. And I am very sensitive to the realities of trust in technology space. And system level trust is what this is about right now. Customers want to know, how are you using my information? They want to know, how are you investing our dollars wisely? And how is this going to ensure that I'm still going to have water delivered to my home, or that I still have access to sewer and stormwater services that I need? And it's just going to be very critical that we spend time. Not only do we still need to get the algorithm assessed, we have to go back to community around the community engagement, to get their feedback on this, because that was what we promised, that once we went through this, we assessed it, we would come back and say, here's the full package, here's what we're looking at, and give them an opportunity to engage with us on this. And so I think that's the other piece that has to happen here, because again, that system level trust is important, because it trickles down to the customer level of trust with us, to the personalized level of trust with us. How do they know if we don't handle it at the system level? How do they know that this personalized, so-called personalized targeted discount, that they can trust it? And so we are having to work through all of those pieces.
Beautiful. Thank you, Director Light. Thank you, Becky, for your time and for fielding our questions. All the concerns you heard here, we've read in past reporting, and that you've even flagged yourselves, like we all are moving forward together. And I think as you keep preparing yourself for the next phase of the pilot program, we can discuss timing, whether it makes sense after you've assessed all the results from RCT1, before you're about to scale up and deploy for RCT2, come back, or we wait until the end of RCT2 when you've got like full scope and breadth, and we can really have a pretty meaty conversation with trade-offs, dynamics, benefits, and cost. Thank you all so much, kindly. All right, we move forward to PUB budget engagement planning is next. Okay, so we are going to be kicking off on a group discussion about what the next couple months look like for us as a board, and specifically how we are engaging with leadership. We had a really helpful conversation yesterday with Amy. Do you want to kick us off, Amy, just on some like level setting, vocabulary, logistics, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so it was great to have the conversation. Thank you. I think it's a helpful reminder of some basic orientation needed for, particularly for new folks who haven't been through a budget process in Portland. And even as that is evolving, and there's a lot that we don't know about specific dates and exactly what the format will look like, I can at least share what it has looked like a little bit in the past, what a work session or a report or engagement with council looks like, as well as what we know is likely about this budget season and timeline, so that you can have those two pieces as you think about what types of priorities you want to make sure are being communicated to council as they enter into the decision making, and what capacity you have for kind of making sure that you can consider all the information and decide what your priorities are. So the annual report was delivered electronically to council, and typically and per code can also include direct engagement with council. So the way that the code is written, calls it a work session. Work sessions are still before council, but slightly less formal. They're more discussion based. Whereas when it's a public hearing with council, they're making a formal decision. And so it's about the decision. The work session has typically been more about PUB highlighting some of the accomplishments from the prior year and what your priorities are for the current year in your work plan, and getting feedback from council on that. So that's the intent behind what the work session would be. And typically it would be a very brief presentation from pub to council, some talking points. It could be have some visual slides or what have you, drawing from materials that we have available from the bureaus or from prior discussions. Or it can just be verbal, much like testimony is, where you're just providing highlights. Usually we try to have at least a couple pub members represented and providing that content so that they're engaging directly with you and building relationship. And then it's kind of question and answer or discussion depending on the interests of council members, the interest of the pub members, just talking about the current circumstances and what you'll be facing in the coming year. So that's if you're engaging with either the Transportation Infrastructure Committee or the full council, their current calendars are pretty established, and we would just need to submit a request for when you want to do the engagement, what we're asking for as far as time for presentation and discussion. And then we can find out whether there's interest on their part in making space for that. We have heard, the desire for, if it's budget related stuff, working it into existing budget schedule and not creating additional, budget focused conversations. But really the intent of your work session is beyond budget. It's about overall program policy and budget advice. There's also the potential for direct one-on-one council member outreach, whether from individual pub members or from groups of pub members or from staff on behalf of pub members. So that's another possibility for engagement. And then of course, there's lots of opportunities for engagement with the executive administrative side, and then a little bit more about the budget process. Let me just show you really quickly the overall calendar. So this is drawing from the Deputy City Administrator, the CFO. I forget what the official title is right now, but they presented information to council a week or two ago with a tentative calendar. We haven't seen the official calendar and actual dates yet, or the budget guidance, but we hope to see something like that coming from operations and the budget office soon. So in November, we do anticipate budget guidance. Then December and January is when the bureaus are actually doing all the technical work and the leadership discussions around their current year budget that is responsive to the budget guidance that was provided. Updating it based on updated forecasts, the direction that they have, and the difficult decisions that they may have to make if it's a cut year, or they're having to kind of consider what it would take for current service level to be maintained versus what is being requested. Budgets are then provided to the administrators, and the city administrator would then release their current service level budget and what it would look like, and in February. And then the time frame basically from March, April, May is all of those, both public conversations, work sessions with council. The rate hearing falls somewhere in there before they do final adoption. So usually by mid to late May, major decisions have moved forward enough, and then they're doing the final approved and adopted budget towards the end of the fiscal year in time to have it go through all of the technical things needed for it to be adopted. So where does PUB typically engage? You typically engage directly with the bureaus on the earlier stuff. So some of that is values informing, finding about what their process is and where there's opportunity for input, engaging directly with the program management or leadership about their services, and then starting to understand what the numbers are looking like based on current forecasts and what their financial plan is developing into. Then you usually are also providing recommendations both in typically written form, in a recommendation letter to council and bureau leadership, in verbal form through testimony, whether at the policy committees or public hearings before full council, and then the rate hearing in the March, April timeframe typically. And then the final rate hearing sometimes carries over into May as well. So last year, those key dates, you were really, considering the more in-depth content in March, finalizing your letter by the very first meeting in April, and providing that in testimony in both April and May at the hearings before council. So one of the reasons I wanted to provide the overall time frame is because that you're going to have to continue to, provide your budget feedback through that process. And part of what the discussion had been was the potential for pre-budget season still engaging or pursuing, if you were interested, either a work session with the council in some form, to formally present your report and or have a discussion about your work plan and priorities for the current year, that then connects to budget as you move through the budget process. So if that were to happen, likely sometime, in January or by early February is where it would be pre-council fully engaged in budget discussions, and not just fall under a push for them to advocate for you to meet directly in the budget sessions. So that's the overview of the timeline. I can come back to this if there's any questions. But just at a high level, so we provided in email some of the priorities that we've heard from you all over time that are potential areas to highlight. So that's what's on the left side of the screen here. Just some very broad areas, obviously, it would require much more detail and discussion. These were just to get people's brains thinking about types of things that you may want to talk about. And then on the right hand side, along with the calendar, just some, in addition to the budget development, which is basically, for the next 4 to 6 months, just some of the other big things that we know are happening that we talked about just a little bit earlier in the updates, such as a unified utility director hire who, should start in January and will have an impact on all of these components. The potential for the unified capital improvement plan, and some of the other core service realignment that is impacting, because the core services are the same folks who are the ones who provide us with information about budget and the development. So those services are being realigned. We don't know exactly what that's looking like or the current workload for the folks that we often tap during this process. So just want to keep that in mind, as well as the natural resources stuff, which has been an important component the last 2 years in feedback, because the pub has had specific advocacy around feedback related to natural resources. So just anticipate that will be another one. So that's the basic foundation, and really, I think there's a lot more conversation and time to be dedicated to these topics, and just want to start to hear from folks what people are interested in hearing, what kind of information you need in order to move forward with any of these, interest level in the and capacity for those components. And happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Kyle Chipman, voting member. I'll give a little context. I had a brief call with Jonah, Lynn, and Amy yesterday on this specific topic. So I just want to clarify my understanding. Amy just shared the majority. I have some additional thoughts, but I'd love to just like Amy said, open the floor up and vibe check, pulse check, priority check where people's heads are at for anticipating if we were to do it late January, early February. We want to be quite solid and sturdy in what our objectives are, how we're approaching this, but people have any strong instincts on this breakdown? As people are formalizing their thoughts, I'll share a couple of my own emerging. In my head, when I heard work session, I was like, oh, dope, like roll up the sleeves, we all get together. That may not be what it is. Amy was sharing that it could be part of a larger hearing or subcommittee. And that is a dynamic I would personally like to avoid, where there are people sitting behind a dais listening to either just a couple of us give a formal presentation and then they ask questions, because that muscle memory feels like it's just part of the fabric of everyday management, where like we're coming in, we do this for a year or multiple years, and it's really to try to open up the conversation. What role do we serve, and what are priorities or objectives for us in much more conversational dynamic. So if there's a way to actually have that be the form of the work session, have it be a proper work session, either with a smaller group of council members or full council, that's a goal for me personally. The other one that jumps out is, in a previous conversation, Farshad was also sharing that there's like a potential lack of vocabulary or even literacy about what deferred investment might carry out. So infrastructure feels really critical, and almost like we give our own understanding of the challenges faced so that the council is better equipped to make decisions around budget. It's not saying these are budget recommendations, but these are the dynamics and the basic vocabulary at play. And to hear it maybe from the public, as opposed to hearing it again from that dynamic of like person at a mic behind then a dais or a semicircle, that one feels helpful. And also potentially, as we identify priorities and as we encounter challenges, as we ask questions of the Bureau, and as we find challenges in non-clarity around communication or decision-making, that we can also share, hey, in this citywide reorganization, we're now X amount of time in, we're having a tough time getting information. This is the reality on the ground from the public's perspective. So that's another interesting dynamic that we can highlight challenges or frictions in this reorganization approach. Jenny, you have the floor.
Thanks, Jenny O'Connor. Yes, you're on to something there, Kyle. I guess the question is, how much information do we know? Like with regards to infrastructure, deferred maintenance, and capital planning, like is that information available to us, or do we have to go digging through the asset management? I know they have the water department has a consultant who's doing their asset management plan. I mean, is this information available? Has it been summarized? Is there something we can start with to look at so we can get up to speed? So we have, we have somewhere to stand when we start working on it. I mean, yes, we know there's a lot of deferred maintenance. Yes, we know that there's a lot of infrastructure that's actually costing, quite a bit of money right now going in. It has to, but there's more coming down. There's affordability programs. Do we have a way to get that information so we can compare like where we are, so we have a baseline, so we can start, to start working on that in a work group?
I'd love to just jump in briefly before maybe Amy or Jonalyn, if you answer from a more like administrative perspective. I'm totally in sync with that thinking, and specifically, I'm curious, like, even without the city, what can we, and it's something in line with an investigation I thought would be helpful for the bureaus, like as citizens just trying to access this publicly, what's the reality of what we can and cannot see? Then as we use our positions on the board, how can we leverage contacts or direct requests from the bureaus in order to gather information? And even there, how much effort is required to just try to assemble and cobble? So it's like 3 levels of, hey, the public can barely even see this or access it. That's a challenge. And then the board, the internal bureaus, they're just trying to like keep pace with reorganization. So they're having a tough time responding, maybe. That's another challenge. And then here's our final picture. So it's that feels like a lot of valuable information in addition to the final cumulative presentation. But I'll yield the floor to Amy and Jonalyn.
Yeah, I think the keys are, if we know what the areas of focus, what your key priorities are, then we as pub staff can look at you know, a number of sources, both information that is publicly available, but really drawing from, there's a lot of really good information during the budget discussions. So we would likely draw a lot from some of the summary information that bureaus have provided during last budget season that look at, you know, where they're at in their, you know, overall asset management plan. And we can request updated information if it's readily accessible. It depends on the complexity of it, whether it's something that staff could just, you know, provide an updated version, or if it's really time intensive, then it might not be something we could get quickly enough because they're focused during the same time in updating those numbers, working on their financial plan and preparing that for public consumption when they submit it in January, February timeframe before council. So the rub is, yes, there's information available. We can do the work of trying to see what is available and figure out what we need to ask about. The key is understanding what the priorities are, the types of questions that you're looking to answer, prepare to, you know, kind of advocate. And I think the bureaus, time permitting, are eager to help provide that information so that we're aligned pretty well with what their priorities are. It's an opportunity to provide some advocacy directly with council on those issues that have been flagged for us.
So, something else that is, thank you, Amy. Something else that is helpful to flag is the Bureau's own period of intensity that I think end of January, last year it was like January 25th or 20 something. End of January, the bureaus need to submit their own proposed budgets to somebody for something. They got to submit it somewhere. I remember that. So like December through January, in addition to holidays, they are in crunch time to try to get all their numbers prepped. So I think if we get our stuff kind of tight and like beginning of December, we could probably make some good headway as opposed to waiting for like, you know, post-holiday, beginning of January, where it's gonna be more intense for the bureaus. Joanne, you had your hand raised. Did you want to say something or share something?
I did, but I'm not sure how relevant it is. I heard, I think it was Jenny say that that the Water Bureau has a consultant doing our asset management. We have staff working on that. So I just wanted to offer that quick clarification in case that was really important. And then I decided it wasn't, but thanks for the opportunity anyway.
Thank you, Joanne.
At tapping into the asset management folks now, you know, of course, they're engaging in this unified capital improvement plan as well as the planning that they need to do just in preparation for budget. So I'm sure they're quite busy, but they have always been very accessible as well and given good overview presentations to PUB in the past about how they do their risk assessment and what asset management looks like for those bureaus and some of the challenges that they face. And so, you know, we can draw either from prior information or ask for current information. Since they're doing often long-term planning, the stuff from, you know, the last times around are still very relevant because of the way that they do their planning. It may not have all of the responses that are decisions that are consequences of decisions that were made, like the rates not being funded at the level that they originally projected and shifts that they need to do or cost changes that have happened since that time. But those might be things that we can just get details from the Bureau in order to flag. Even to request the time before council to see if there's receptiveness from the committee to have direct engagement with the board. We just need to be clear about what the point is. What's the outcome the board's looking for? What priorities are they hoping to focus on so that then they can weigh it against. They have a lot of demands on their plate. And so they ultimately decide, you know, what they make space for in their agendas, just like you do. So we need to see if they're receptive to what we present and request.
Thank you so much, Amy. As a time check, we are 5 minutes over this period of the discussion. I have one closing or kind of next step thought. But before we wrap up this section and move on to announcements and next meeting, does anybody else want to have their voice be heard or have any instincts that they want to share on this this topic specifically? And it'd be pretty brief.
This is Alexis. Just very briefly, I want to make sure that in the priorities to highlight that the kind of natural resources, One Water work is elevated. I'm assuming that it falls under the realignment of bureaus piece, but I do want to just make sure that that is clear since that's been a big focus and area of interest for the board over the last year. And it's really going to get a lot of momentum, it sounds like, from Amy's update earlier in the next several months.
Beautiful. Thank you, Alexis. All right, seeing no other hands, we're dialing into specifics, but we're not quite in that actionable state yet. So I'm thinking that our next meeting on the 20th, we block out some time. I'm happy to facilitate like a little workshop where we actually take these priorities, we drill into these one or two, really, we want to hit these hard. We're going to break out, maybe there's some project teams don't require formal administration, it's just 2 people. Some committees do, it's more of a burden for Amy and Jonah Lynn, but then we can kind of like, create little self-organized clusters, do some work, also think about capacity, what's the reality of how much we can prepare and really show up strong to and for city council, and then set some timelines in place. So I think I would love to get that at our next November 20th session. Does that sound good to everybody? You can even just do a thumbs up via emoji or just give a holler. Cool, thumbs. All right, great. Hold on, thumbs. Oh, that was thrilling. Okay, then that's what we're going to do on the 20th. Great. We move on to, do we have any announcements, Amy or Jonah Lynn?
I think we probably already touched on the field trip. Just look for the survey. And then we have lots coming up in November and December. So we will talk about some of what Kyle just mentioned, potentially about affordability strategy, and we'll have more information about the solid waste rate review piece, which will be hopefully a very brief discussion, but can kind of figure out how it would or would not fit with your other core priorities. So we will have more information for that. So because the field trip maybe just, could be as early as the day after our next meeting, just want to make sure that you look for email communications about that, fill out the survey, and then we'll be communicating with you very quickly to firm up the date, get it on calendars, and schedule for those who are able to attend. So look for more, hopefully by the end of the week, if we can get all those surveys back. We've only heard from a few folks, so we'd like to hear from the rest of you to make sure that we're choosing a date that works for the most.
Beautiful. Anything you want to add, Jonah Lynn? Cool. All right. Well, in that case, we are set. We move to adjournment. Upcoming meetings, November 20th, December 2nd, December 18th. Contact information on the screen. Ever-present appreciation to Amy and Jonah Lynn's efforts to keep us informed and keep